Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's Fit for Learning webinar. We're really excited to have an opportunity to be talking to you today about another fundamental concept or principle, and we're going to be talking about creating your financial safety net, or more specifically, looking at how to establish or to build our emergency fund. My name is Kyle Bingham, and I am the Managing Director of Financial Wellness. And joining me today is one of my colleagues, Kenji Noguchi. Here's a look at what it is that we would like to cover today. First and foremost, we're just going to talk a little bit more about what is an emergency fund and how does it work. Then moving into how big should that emergency fund be, or how do we need to go about saving and building that up. We'll talk about where you should keep your emergency fund and how you should, or even if you should, invest that money. And then lastly, we'll talk about some of the different expenses that it would cover, and also the importance of replenishing that fund after using it. And I know for many of you, this might just be a good reminder, if nothing else. For some of you, maybe you're already have this as one of your goals, you're working towards building up that emergency fund. Again, you can use today as a good reminder. And then for those of you that may not have an emergency fund, we're going to walk you through all of the steps that you would need to take to actually get that created for yourself. So why is this such a fundamental concept when you're looking at just general financial wellness or financial health? Well, the reality of it is that many individuals are not prepared for emergencies. Life happens, and there are going to be different expenses and different emergencies that we're all going to be faced with at a variety of different points in our lives. It could be maybe a unexpected car expense. It could be a couple $100. It may be a visit to urgent care that's $200. It may be a visit to the emergency room, which could be several $1,000s. And really what I want you to kind of understand today is that the emergency fund is really designed to help us to avoid going into debt or even further in debt. Because oftentimes when you don't have that emergency fund, something comes up, more than likely, how are you paying for that? I think for most people, that's going to be going on to a credit card. And fundamentally, that's not necessarily a problem as long as we have a plan to be able to get that credit card paid off. But what we find happening a lot of times is as these emergencies are happening, as we're trying to pay for these things, we continue to accumulate more and more debt on that credit card. And before we know it, now we have all of this extra debt that we never started out with when we look at 6 months before or a year before. And again, I think that the big thing here is, even if it's a baby step forward, that is still absolutely a step forward. And so as we walk through all of these points today and these steps, just remember that any step that you can take is getting you to that place where ultimately you're going to have that emergency fund readily available for you. And so with that, I'm going to kick it over to Kenji for a few moments here. So Kenji, can you walk us through this first question? What is an emergency fund, and how is it going to work?
Yeah, of course. And thanks, Kyle, for the transition. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the webinar here today. And, when you think about an emergency fund, what really is it? Well, it's that dedicated pool of money that you might have for any unexpected expenses or financial emergencies. I want everyone to take a moment here and think about their emergency funds. Do I have one? Do I not? Why or why not too? And really think of it this way. When let's say you work at a company, or maybe even you took a new job, you typically have insurance or healthcare coverage when you do so. And most people would instantly think, well, yeah, I want to take that. I want to have that insurance. Well, think of the emergency fund the same way, right? It's almost like your self-insurance policy for those unexpected emergencies or needs. Looking at that last slide, it's pretty compelling to see why we need an emergency fund. And really the industry standard, the rule of thumb, if you would, is 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses. Now, a lot of the times folks will think, hey, that's got to be my rent or maybe my mortgage payment. And those could certainly be added to it, but I want you to take a step back and really think, what's actually an emergency for me? We'll go through a little bit more of those examples, but as Kyle said, maybe it's home repairs, maybe it's a car issue, maybe it's even some medical coverage supplement that you might need. So again, an emergency fund for those unexpected things in life. Life certainly happens fast and it changes quick too. So you want to ensure that you have some type of expenses easily accessible for those immediate needs. So easily accessible, what does that mean? Typically it's going to be liquid, or maybe it's in a short-term type of investment vehicle, maybe a money market, maybe CDs, maybe short-term bonds. The whole thought there is you want this money liquid in case you need it, right? We don't want to have wait for trading days or maybe other needs or timing to get that money when you need it right away. Now, really, what's the point of having it? Well, it's going to reduce that level of financial stress that you might have, especially if maybe you have a lot of credit card debt, thinking, hey, I'm finally just getting ahead of this. I want to build my emergency reserve. Something else might happen. What do you do again? Well, the purpose of that emergency fund is to supplement you from using credit card lines or having to get personal loans, or maybe looking at stop deferring from your retirement plan. A lot of great things that are going to add up to that financial stress for you when you have that emergency fund. Or again, thinking of my example there, maybe as an insurance policy for yourself, it gives you that peace of mind. And really, you should only use them for those emergencies. And the thought is, well, you have to replenish that amount after each use. You don't want to use it, have nothing, and then get back into that vicious cycle of maybe other lines of avenues.
Excellent. Exactly, Kenji. And now kind of moving on, as Kenji mentioned, there is a general rule of thumb of how much you want to eventually have saved in that emergency fund. And so can you go ahead and walk us through this example, Kenji, and then kind of talk about what folks might be able to do as they start to build the emergency fund or get to the point where they have that 3 to 6 months worth of reserve?
Yeah, of course here. And, folks, I know this is a lot of math going on here, and maybe it seems simple, but the general rule of thumb is, hey, what's your actual net income? How much are you taking in every month? You take that number, and then, of course, if you're doing that, you might have a budget there, and maybe you don't. We'll be honest, a lot of times folks might just not have a budget, and that's okay. Maybe you look at calculating your monthly expenses by budgeting for 1 month, get a rough idea and annualize that. Or you structure it out and have the full annualized number of what your expenses are. Whatever the case is, once you have that income, you have your expense number, then you can actually calculate that emergency fund size. So let's assume you have a $3,000 monthly expense. Well, 3 months is $9,000. That should be how much you have in your emergency fund. 6 months, again, we'll just do the simple math, that's $12,000. Now, here's where a lot of questions arise. It's, well, which one should I do? Is it 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months? Which one, Kenji? And a lot of the times here, think of it this way. If you have a stable job, maybe you have a spouse, partner, dual income household, 3 months generally is going to be the best option for you there. Why 3 months? Well, it's going to cover those direct needs. You have a stable job, you have income coming in. If anything happens, you have enough reserve to maybe get back in the market and find a new job. Or possibly even, you might say, hey, I just am more comfortable with 6 months, and that's okay too. But when you think about the 3 to 6 month timeline, I want you to think, hey, do we have stable jobs? If not, maybe 6 months. If I'm not on a constant payroll schedule, maybe it's variations of my income every month, and I just don't know. You want to ensure that you have that 6 months extra buffer. Now, I'll say this here. A lot of the times people ask me, well, I don't know my expenses. Will you build the budget for me? And we're happy to assist you there. So give us a call and we can help you rough that out. But maybe even at this point, I'll offer you my suggestion of maybe using a flat dollar amount. Instead of having to go through the ringer and figure out your expenses, maybe you just start with a flat dollar. Now, I typically advise folks $5K a person in their household is the bare minimum. So if it's just you, $5K is at least what you'll need. You and a partner, $10K. You, partner, child, $15K. Maybe you, partner, child, and a pet. They're part of our families too, right? Vets aren't cheap. Add that extra $5K. And maybe you might find that, hey, these work out to about 3 to 6 months of our living expenses too. The point I'm making here, folks, if you don't have an emergency fund, set a short-term goal. Set something achievable. Maybe it's just $1,000 to start. And as you reach that, just increase the threshold. Again, you want to find that good balance for yourself in your own personal scenario. Whether you start with just a 1,000 goal, you use the 5,000 per person in your household goal, or maybe even run out all the expenses and find the true 3 to 6 months. Whatever the case is, you need to have an emergency fund, and these are just some other ideas or tools that you could use to start building one too.
Excellent, great, thank you, Kenji. And I think what all of you can kind of see here is that it's going to be personalized to your individual situation. And I think a lot of times when we're looking at these larger numbers, it's natural to feel a little bit overwhelmed, especially if you don't have an emergency fund or you're just now setting that goal to be able to do that. And just know that maybe for some of you, it is better to set one of those shorter term benchmarks of maybe only $500 or $1,000. And then as you continue to build that up, we can review that, reassess, and then change your goals. Because again, it's going to be a process. We want to remain consistent, but at the same time, we want to feel like we're actually being proactive and taking steps forward. There's not going to be, in other words, there's not a wrong way to really build out your emergency fund as long as it's part of your goals and you're working towards that goal each and every month. So now moving into the question with regards to where should I keep that emergency fund? Kenji already hit on the fact that we want that account easily accessible, okay? A bank or a credit union is going to be one of the easiest, most convenient places for you to have that emergency fund. When you're looking at the type of account that you should use, you can have a traditional savings account. What has really become popular over the years are your high yield savings accounts, and you're going to be getting a better rate when you're using those high yield savings accounts, primarily because that particular bank is going to be online. Whereas with your traditional savings account, it might be one of the larger banks, it's a brick and mortar, and you may only get a rate of, say, maybe 1%. But when you're looking at these online banks, and this could be SoFi, Capital One, Ally, there's a number of different institutions out there, you're getting upwards of 4, almost 5% of a return on your money. And so as long as you're comfortable with that online option, those high yield savings account can be very beneficial. And money market, again, it is another option that is available. Again, here, there's not going to be a wrong answer to this. A lot of it has to do with convenience, what you're comfortable with. Do you want to have a brick and mortar location, or are you fine to do everything online? And then probably one of the most important points that we see from time to time is this question of how should I be investing the money? And you've heard it already today that we want quick and easy access to this money, because if we have that emergency expense, we need to try to grab that money as soon as possible to be able to pay for that. And so we want that money to be very liquid. And that means primarily that we need to be really careful about any decisions that we might make to invest that money. For a real simple example would be, let's say you built up that emergency fund, you've got that full 6 months. That's going to be a lot of money that's sitting there, and some people might tend to want to take that money and say, hey, I want to go get that invested in the market. I want that growing more than the rate that I'm currently getting on that money. The concern with that is you're taking that money, if it is now exposed to the market, depending upon what the market's doing, depending upon what that investment is that you've selected, you're going to see a fluctuation in value. And if there were to be a sharp downturn with that investment or a sharp downturn in the market, you could see the account value go down. Now you have that unexpected expense, so you have to sell at a low. It may not be all of the money, but it could be a portion of that money. So now you're locking in a loss on that money, and then you also have to wait for that money to settle, which could take a couple days before you get access to it. And so that's why really the emergency fund, it's best kept bank, credit union, either traditional or high yield savings account, and we really don't want to be investing that into any type of stock market product typically, or anything that's going to expose you to high volatility. Continuing on here, and again, these are things that we've already alluded to and kind of hit on already, but what are the reasons to create the emergency fund? You see those here: medical expenses, home repairs, loss of income, other types of repairs like car repairs. These are things that we absolutely want to have the availability to be able to use this fund. And then the other reminder that also should be top of mind is making sure that you have the framework built out, that you have a plan on how you're going to then replenish that fund, especially if you're in a situation where you've built out your emergency fund and you may no longer be contributing to that fund. You have that expense. Let's say you have to withdraw $1,000 or $2,000. Now we need to make sure that we add that back into our budget, right? Maybe we need to start contributing $50 from each paycheck, $50 from each paycheck. So whenever we're using it, make sure that the replenishment is also happening. So really, what are the steps that you can take? We've talked about what emergency fund is, how it works, where you should put it. First and foremost, calculate the amount that you want to save. If you want to start with a smaller amount, that is perfectly fine. Remember, it's personalized to you and your situation. We just want to make sure that we're taking steps forward. Once you've decided how much you want to save, now we need to look more specifically at how much you can afford to save, whether it's each paycheck, whether it's each month, and now we want to set that goal for ourselves. Moving on to step 3, we've got to figure out, where do we want to have that money? We need it easily accessible. Do we like the convenience of a bank that has a brick and mortar location, or are you okay doing everything online? And the trade-off of doing things online is you're going to typically get a better interest rate. Number 4, and this is a really good one. I know it's simple, but I think it's powerful. Automate your contributions whenever possible to that emergency savings account. That could be whether it's coming directly from your paycheck, from payroll, whether it's coming directly from your checking account after your check is deposited into there. Try to make that automated. It's just easier, and it doesn't really require us to take additional steps. It's coming out, it's going into the account, we're good. And then number 5, like we've alluded to here as well, you do need to assess and adjust as necessary. If we use some of the fund, we need to have a plan to replenish that. If we're just starting out, let's just set a target goal of, say, $500. But once we've reached that goal, now we need to reassess and go back and look and say, okay, now I want to start building that fund to get to where I have 3 months worth of reserve or 6 months worth of reserve. And if you can kind of follow these steps, this is really an important and fundamental thing that you want to be doing as a part of your overall financial planning. Now, we are here to help you with this process. And one of the things that probably has stuck out is, well, I don't know how much I can save. I don't know if I have any disposable income. And so one of the conversations that we would be happy to have with all of you is, maybe we need to start with budgeting. And if you're a frequent listener and viewer here with our webinars, earlier in the year, we talked about budgeting. We talked about the 50-30-20 methodology for building a budget. We can sit down with you, help you put your budget together, and then add in the goal of contributing $50 per month to your emergency fund as a part of that budget. Or if you're just ready to kind of put the emergency fund together, get your online account set up, we can definitely sit down and help you with that process as well. And one other really quick reminder, again, each month with our Fit for Learnings, we try to design these to be fundamental concepts. Again, it's not going to be things that you more than likely have never heard before. It's good basic principles that are going to help you to become more financially well. Another frequently requested topic that we get here is with regards to debt. Different ways to pay down your debt, different strategies that you can use to get credit card debt paid off, installment loans, whatever the case might be. And so for next month in May, we are going to be tackling this topic. And so if you haven't registered already, you can scan that QR code right there and get registered. And also, for those of you that like to go back and just rewatch this webinar and listen to some of these tips, we will be following up today's webinar with an email. So just keep an eye out for that, and you'll get a link to the recorded version of today's presentation. And with that, folks, I just want to thank you all for taking a few moments out of your day to be here. As always, we are here to help in any way that we can. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll be happy to sit down and have a discussion about emergency funds, budgeting, or anything else that you might need help with. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again for joining. Bye-bye.